We're live? All right, very good. Thank you everyone for coming out to this inaugural ChaDev+DevOps. So what we're going to try and do is talk about DevOps. And we're going to do a variety of things. I was fortunate to get Puppet to send a couple people from Maryland to do a cool demo tonight. I think it should be very interesting. I think a great way to kick things off. Next month, we've got New Relic coming in. The month after that, I'd like to see if we couldn't pull one of those panel things together and just talk about DevOps, right? What is it? You know, what do the corporate people think? What do the startup people think? And everything in between. And then I want to also, get this to the point where maybe we don't have a formal presentation, but we talk about Docker and we do it, and we actually spin up some instances and, do things. So I think there's a lot of stuff that we can do since this will just be monthly. I don't think it'll be that hard to, keep it rolling, and I appreciate this turnout. So let me go through my, obligatory slides here. So where's ChaDev+DevOps, right? So why won't this move? All right, that's you all. I assume you all know that's the meetup page, ChaDev+DevOps. As I mentioned, we're going to be meeting the third Tuesday of each month at 6 o'clock here at Society of Work. Next month, we've got New Relic lined up. And now, thank you to our sponsors, Society of Work, because this is a great place to work if you're looking for a place to do that and to meet. This is incredible. I love coming to the lunches and all the other stuff. It's just so cool. And it's in Chattanooga. It's so cool. And thank you to Puppet Labs for being here tonight. They sponsored the pizza, so thank you for that. And there's plenty of it because we bought enough for everybody who RSVP'd. I got to learn how that RSVP business works.
Never do.
So, but thank you. So have seconds and thirds and fourths, and there'll probably be some to take home as well. So thank you, Puppet folks, for doing that. And then ChaDev. ChaDev pays for this spot. That's their meetup page. Here are the meetups. I assume that if I do a pull request for this, I can get my name on here? Or my chat? Okay, I'll work on that. I might need some help. But hey, that's part of the dev part of DevOps, right? Okay. These are the slides, the standard slides, right? And we're looking for sponsorship for this group. We don't have that yet. So if you are looking to sponsor, talk to Andrew or me. Talk to me, and I'll talk to Andrew. So we'll go from there. And I thought Chris would be here, and I had to throw this next slide in for him because I didn't want him to think I was just a boring presenter. But I'm so happy about this. I'm kind of like this. All right, cool. All right, with that, Tim, why don't you come up and introduce yourself and introduce your partner, and then we'll switch over, including the mic. While he's getting hooked up, we have Puppet stickers. We have ChaDev+DevOps stickers. And I get to do something that I've always wanted to do. I'm going to throw t-shirts. So I have 4 of them here. This is a large. I thought that was a pretty good throw now. But you did have pizza in one hand. Medium. 2 more. Large. All right. And medium. Man! Maybe it was my throwing. That was fun.
All right, ready to get started. Hey, I'm Tim Marcinowski, also known as Tim Ski. I talk a lot at DC meetups, continuous delivery, Challenge Cup, a couple other cool things. Been a Puppet user for 3 years, and I'm actually new to Puppet Labs. I used to be a Java and Python developer well, more like Groovy development. It's kind of like the same thing. Kind of mess around a lot with crude development, like a lot of web development stuff. I have a systems background, been a system administrator for like ever. Decided to join Puppet because I love the roadmap. So like from just using the tool for so long, I really like what they're going to be doing with the 4.0 release. So I have a lot of topics I'm going to talk about, but of course the topics are only good based on what you tell me you want to hear more about. So I'm going to take a seat here, and I'm going to, kind of shout a couple topics, and I want you to raise your hand if you're particularly more interested in this kind of stuff. So, I'm going to be demoing a Golang project. You guys interested in Golang? Let me see some hands. So we got like 2 hands, 2 out of 10. We got Jenkins. Anybody interested in Jenkins? Pretty basic stuff. Cool. So you got like 3 or 4 hands. AWS, Amazon Web Services. Okay, everybody. That's cool. Elasticsearch. Yes. Cool. I'll try my best to talk through that. Like building RPMs and Yum repositories, more like system stuff. Cool. We got 1. And Python Flask. Okay, that's awesome. All right. We got like 5. I love Python. I love Flask a lot. So anyway, so I have like no slides but this slide. So this is my email address. This is my GitHub. I have Twitter, but like, yeah, you just don't want to. I don't really post anything. It's more of like keeping up with the NSA is doing and all those crazy cool things, right? So kind of go into what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to spin up a node in AWS, right? And I want to show you what that looks like in our new Puppet module, right? So everything I do, it's going to be like concentrated around Puppet, but of course there's all the technologies that I've ranted off, like that's going to be like stuff that I'm going to be demoing. So like I provisioned an instance earlier. So if I look at my Amazon Web Console, which I actually never log into. Yeah.
For some reason, I gotta change something in Kibana.
Okay.
That screen
Yeah.
share, it's pointed at your.
Hold on. All right. Let me.
When you plug in the projector into your webcam.
Oh.
Just to close the appearance.
Nice. All right.
Okay, we're good.
Cool. So I log into my console. I have a Puppet master, and I have 1 agent, and that's great. So I'm going to do this, like, of course, all of this can be automated because, like, I do this stack all the time. Not this particular demo, but, like, just doing Puppet demos all the time. So I have my master, I have an agent already out there, and to kind of provision that agent in Puppet code, this kind of looked like using the new AWS module. Some of the things I care about, like provisioning in Amazon Web Services, is my AMI, like what image I'm going to use, security groups, key pair, the key pair that I'm going to use to log into the system SSH, a user data script to bootstrap the Puppet agent, and of course like tags. Tags are very important, and I'll kind of go through like why tags are important, especially in Amazon Web Services. So like I've already provisioned the system, and as you can see I have rel master Tim Ski, like that's my Puppet master. It's obviously Red Hat based. So Puppet has a way to like see what something looks like, a resource, a type reference, what it looks like in Puppet. And since we have the EC2 like provider type, you can kind of see like what a particular instance looks like in Puppet code. But like, say for example, I didn't deploy this instance with Puppet. You could still do this for any instance that's in Amazon. So instead of like having to like read docs and like start from scratch, like if you already have some running systems out there, you can kind of already get back something and send it out that says, hey, in Puppet code, this is what this particular instance looks like in Puppet code, right? Like we saw, tags, security groups, region, VPC, subnet, all those great things. So like before I even go into provisioning a new system, I already have a system that I want to like classify. So this is the Puppet Enterprise console. Puppet open source doesn't come shipped with a console, so like there's some sort of console out there. I actually haven't used it in like 2 years, but this is what the Enterprise console looks like, and this is version 3.8, so this is the latest release of Puppet Enterprise. So as we saw, like, I have my master and I have an agent, and it's like, okay, whether you're automatically provisioning or auto-scaling or doing those kind of things in Amazon Web Services, It's like when a server comes up, like you have to classify that node to get X, Y, and Z on that resource, whether it's an application, a middleware component, operating system compliance settings, kernel parameters, whatever it may be. So if I go in like classifications, this is how you like tell like what nodes get like what, right? And it's usually like a grouping of nodes, or it's a single node if you really need. So like for example, like out of the box, this is what it looks like. Like this is the default classifications. So I'm going to create one. I'm going to call this one Yum Nginx API. And essentially, for this particular class, this is where like the Python Flask app that I'm going to deploy onto this particular node, or nodes. It could be a set of nodes, and like that code is like right here. So I used to work at FINRA. They do stock market regulation. Large enterprise, big data shop. Actually 5 times more data transactions than Facebook, so a lot going on, right? So essentially, like, I love Yum repositories, I hate Red Hat Satellite, and I needed a way to, like, in my continuous integration pipeline, like my Jenkins pipeline, like I needed a way to build an RPM and put it in my Yum repository. Because you have an operating system, and the operating system has a package manager. And it only makes sense to use the operating system's native package manager to distribute packages. And those packages, like I said, could be applications. They could be, maybe you just have some files you want to install somewhere, like, I don't know. You want to build something, and then you want to package it and ship it, and then, distribute it among your servers, right? So this is what this project looks like. And for this deployment, I have Nginx, I have a Flask app, Green Unicorn as my Whiskey server, and like pretty standard stuff. And essentially what you're going to do is, all it is an upload API in front of a Yum repository. And what you will do is you will post an RPM to this endpoint, this URI, and you're going to get like your status, like what happened, like did it process, like did it complete, did it not complete, like those kinds of things, right? Like typical API stuff. You're going to process some data, and you're going to get a return of 200 or 400 or 500 internal servers, like all that stuff. So like that's what I'm going to deploy right now using Puppet. And what that deployment looks like is in Puppet code, like kind of just going really quickly over it. We have an Nginx manifest, and we have like the main like Puppet manifest. And essentially, like, right, I have variables, or what in Puppet we call parameters, defined right here. And these are default. Like any of these can be interchangeable, and I'll show you that through the console. Right, so like I'm telling like what my Green Unicorn port should be, like my Git directory, my deploy directory, my log path, like all those, right? Because those are interchangeable components. Like for example, if I'm deploying this to one server, maybe another app team is using components from this manifest or this module, and like they can change those variables or parameters. So you can see like I'm disabling like SE Linux, and like I'm like installing some like RPMs in Puppet code. I'm installing some pip packages, which there is actually a pip module out there, but it's kind of like not so great because like you have to wait for an entire run for it to find where pip is located. So like for this particular example, I'm just using an executive. And of course, like I'm defining like my directories that I want created, my layout. I'm copying my types over for Nginx, my supervisor configuration to run my Green Unicorn script. And then VCS repo, the version control software repository. What this is particularly doing is it's going out to Git and getting my master branch, and it's staging it in a directory which I want. So like that doesn't seem like too typical, because like you want to run like you want to do a continuous integration build, and like you want to run tests, and you want to like do integration tests, and then you want to like promote. So like that's the recommended that's the recommended way. But like for demo purposes, like I'm just showing you like, hey, like since technically Python doesn't like really get compiled like you would like a WAR file or like package or something like that, like you could just copy it, right, and it'll just work as long as you don't care about the test coverage and like the cool like CI stuff. And like that's pretty much it. Like I'm managing the service supervisor D. I'm making sure files are present, using a template, and the ERB templating engine looks very similar to like this. So like for my Green Unicorn script, like this right here, like what's my deploy path, what's my Git directory, what's my port. right? So essentially what you would do in your enterprise is you would write one module for Green Unicorn, you would write one template, and then you would basically have like another module that would subscribe to it. So if you're writing a lot of like Python apps like Django or Flask or Pyramid or any of those other kind of micro frameworks, like you can build like one module and just kind of like include that and pass parameters that are relevant for your deployment, right? So this way you're not writing like five Puppet modules to do the same thing. Like you just don't want to do that. Like that doesn't even make any sense. You just have one module and then you just plug in parameters like variables into that. But like I said, for this particular demo, I've kind of just put this all together just to kind of showcase like what this deployment looks like in Puppet. So, you know, I've created the node classification here. I'm going to keep this pretty simple. So like Puppet gathers facts and like inventory data about a particular node, and usually you classify nodes based on those facts. Like, and why I brought up like Amazon tags as an example is when you provision a node in Amazon, what you should be doing, especially if you're using Puppet, is you should apply an IAM role to your instance, which lets you do like EC2 describe instances, and then you can get the tags and turn those into facts. And that way you can classify nodes based on tags and like do some cooler stuff. So for example, like you may have a tag on a server called role, you might have a tag on a server called purpose, and based on role and purpose, if they equal this, it gets these manifests. And that can be like, okay, role is it's a database server, and then like purpose is like app A or app B, right? And that kind of like, okay, based on this application, it needs this kind of database, and then in Puppet code, it would make that transaction on the server and build it out the way it should be. So I'm not gonna declare this node based on the facts that we gather. I'm just gonna go and I'm just gonna pin the node, like one particular node, for example. So I have this node, and I pin it. Just basically means like, instead of like doing a grouping of nodes and doing facts and doing like regular expression or other operators, I'm just saying like this one particular node or these groups of nodes, like I want this class, and that would be the modules that I write. So in this particular case, it's the Yum Nginx API module. So you see matching nodes. So like, you know, if I did want to like do some like regular expression or something, or just like something really simple, like, hey, it's any Red Hat's, you know, any Red Hat servers, there's two nodes matching, and you want to see like what those two nodes are, they would show up here. Like if you wanted to keep going down this path, right? Or I would do like, you can, of course, you can do multiple classifications of facts, like say like host name, right? And you just wanted to use regular expression, right? It automatically assumes like a wildcard, like for that particular regular expression, right? So there was two nodes and et cetera, et cetera. All right, cool. So this is like where I assign like that Puppet module I just showed you. So like after you get your Puppet code on the Puppet master, in this dashboard, it automatically like indexes like all of the modules that you have available to put on that particular node. So like remember it was Puppet Yum Nginx API. So you add this class, and of course it's not applied just yet. Like you have to go and commit it and stuff. But like here is those parameters or those variables in that module, like right here. So like base directory, you know, get directory. These are all default values, but of course you can change those. Like, you know, if for example this one actually has an Nginx class. So like, if I were to do, if I were to add this particular class, and I would see like the port that Nginx runs on. It's on port 80, but it can be like any other port that I wanted to. So I'm like reusing that code and just kind of like plugging in the data that's relevant for that particular like application or something. So I'm just going to do default values that I have set in my manifest. I'm not going to change anything. And now it's applied. So in the Puppet world, you wait either like within a 30-minute window and it'll automatically apply to that particular node, or I could go on that node and I could just do a Puppet run, and I can show you the logs, like what that's going to look like. So I clicked on this particular node, and like I mentioned, here's all these facts. And out of the box, it just kind of pulls like EC2 metadata, and I just want to go to, you know, the public IP address, and I want to go to that instance to kick off a Puppet run. Of course, like if I spun up a node and it was classified that way, it would automatically get applied without even having to do anything. But for demo purposes, it's just easier to just kind of run through like how Puppet reacts in, whether you're doing it this way or you're doing automated provisioning, whether you're in AWS or like VMware or any other, most cloud platforms. Right. So I could run this in simulate mode to show you like what would happen, but I'm just going to execute it just for time purposes to show you like it's going to go and configure Yum and Nginx on this. So right now it's talking to the master and it's doing like a diff, like a catalog compile, and says, okay, what's on the system right now? And like, what do I care about? And it's going to go out there and it's going to, build a catalog for this particular node, and it's going to send it over, and then it's all pull based, so it's going to pull it down from the master and start executing all of this on the system. And you'll start seeing this, whether it's like right here in the console, or it's in a log, or it's on the dashboard, or forwarding to any log aggregator like Splunk or Graylog or Logstash or any of those kind of things. So just kind of running through, just kind of like, hey, installing Nginx. I want to get rid of some default files. I want to install like my packages, disable SE Linux. Like I want to do all these things that I defined in the manifest. And so for each one of these resources, like you see like this is a resource, this is a resource, like it gives you like a runtime of how long each like resource took to execute, and then like the overall like how long it took to deploy this particular like manifest, which typically like this deployment would be like 21 seconds, right? Because it's really not that big. I mean, you're just deploying like flat files essentially and managing services and such. So, it's up and live. So like if I just like come here and I just do like simple, yeah, that was great. If I just come here, like I just go and I just do like a curl request against the URL, right? I'm going to see Nginx returning, like I have a repository set up called pre-release, right? And this is a Yum repository. That's great. And then like I want to make sure like my API service is up and available, like, like Green Unicorn's doing its job. Right? It's great. So like my API is working, Nginx is working to serve my RPMs, like everything's great, like awesome. So that's cool. So now it's like, all right, well, I already have a Yum repository with an API front end, and I'm going to go do a build right now. Like I'm going to go and I'm going to do a git checkout, and I'm going to pass in the build as a parameter, and I'm going to go and I'm going to take my project Plural, which is a Golang project that I started working with. Like I just started working with Golang like, I guess two months ago. So I'm relatively new to the language, and I'm like still like kind of figuring it out, and I really love it. But of course it's still young, so you have to build a lot of stuff on your own. Essentially what this is going to do is it's going to basically build like this JSON dump of like all this stuff about like my system that's relevant, and it's going to send it to Elasticsearch index, and then I'm going to like go into Kibana and I'm going to like create some pretty graphs and all that cool stuff. But like some of the information like this particular agent does is it grabs like what Docker containers are running, like disk utilization, EC2 metadata, like what's my domain, like what gem packages are installed, like load, memory, like my operating system packages, my pip installed packages, like TCP listening, like all this good stuff that like I care about to some degree, like whether it's from a security standpoint or whether it's from an inventory standpoint, or like I don't know, maybe I'm just an infrastructure nut and I just want to know about this stuff. So that's cool. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this particular Git repository, and this particular Jenkins job, this is kind of a job to show you like what not to do with Jenkins, and let me show you why. So instead of using like Git, and instead of using like the Golang plugin for Jenkins, I just basically wrote a script, like essentially like a makefile, but like in a Jenkins job. And like you should have tests like for your software, and like you should execute those tests and you should get those metrics. Like that's what you should do. Like that's continuous integration. Me just executing a script isn't like continuous integration. It's just using Jenkins to just press a button and to do something for me. So like essentially like the reason why I did it this way though was like say all the times like I don't have Jenkins available, like I just want to execute a script to build and like compile my code and then like run it. Like I just want to like build it and just see if it even worked. So like technically what I'm doing here is I'm just like clearing out my workspace. I'm getting all the libraries that I need for my particular Golang project, which is like this. So it's a go get, and then here's my libraries I'm using for this particular project. I'm going in and I'm doing my git clone. Going in, I'm doing my build. And then I'm staging files that should be there for my particular RPM, which you see here. Like this is like, hey, I need these in these locations. Because I'm using FPM to build my RPM. And FPM stands for FN Package Manager. And what that does is it builds RPMs, debs, and I think there might be something else it builds. But it's like the easiest way to build an RPM. Like better than using like RPM specs and like figuring all that stuff out and I don't know, reinventing the wheel. Like there's already a Ruby gem out there called FPM, and essentially all it is just one string to go and build an RPM. Like it's pretty easy, right? Like there's not much to it. Like you see here, like who's my owner, and like pretty straightforward. And it tells me what directories I want to package up to be a part of my RPM. And at the last step here, I'm passing in a build parameter to tell me what's my Yum API. And it's going to find the RPM and then it's going to post it to my API so then it's available for distribution. All right, so that's great. So I'm just going to build parameters. And this is the host that we provisioned, right? We have Yum Nginx API on this, so I'm going to build it. And if everything goes right, like it's going to compile my Golang project, and then it's going to build an RPM, and then it's going to post it to my API Yum repository. Right? Pretty straightforward. So like what would happen is like if you used FPM to build an RPM, then it's like, well, what do I do with this RPM? Like how do I get it on my satellite server, my Yum repository? Like, and you have to like SCP files over, or you like stage an S3 bucket and do like a polling, like crazy stuff. Like you can have a message queue and like crazy, like it gets pretty, imagination can get pretty wild. So essentially like, that's great. Like I posted my RPM, I got my response back, the job was successful, right? And I just come here and I could see like in my pre-release folder, like here it is, like plural, and then 21 is my build number. Like this is the 21 job that went off, because in RPMs, like it's gonna, like in the build job, like it increments, and then when I do like Yum update, it's gonna find the latest one that was built, which is like the version number goes up and it's gonna install it. So like think about this from like a continuous delivery perspective is like, if you're a dev and you're like doing exactly what I'm doing, like you have your own isolated Yum repository, you have your own RPMs, and then you have your own test system to go install, and like if you want to do integration tests or you want to do something else, like it's all right there in your own dev environment. Like you don't need to like talk to ops and say, hey ops, like can you take this RPM that I built and put it in wherever the repository is? Like no, you don't have to do that, right? So that's great. So like this is here, and like that's awesome. So it's like, well, now I want to get that RPM installed on all of my systems. So I'm going to go to, back to here. I'm going to show you just really quick what I'm doing for this particular Puppet manifest. This one's pretty simple because it's pretty much just installing a package, making sure the service is running, right? Like some basic stuff. So here, like we mentioned before, here's like variables or parameters, right? And by default, I have one set, like yum.marcinowski.com. And that's great, I can use that, but like I want to use like my one I just built. So I'm going to plug that into the dashboard. Or you can use like Data if you're an advanced Puppet user, like that's also possible. And I'm going to put my Elasticsearch host, my port, my environment, and that's going to be like templatized into my plural configurations to tell me like, hey, when you create this JSON, like what Elasticsearch server should it go to? So in Puppet language, Yum repo will set up a repo file on the system, right? And it's going to tell me like what my URL is, and it's going to define things like that in Puppet on the server. And then it's going to make sure the latest plural package is installed. So like if I execute on the system, like it's going to install the current one that's there, but if I do another build, it's going to install the next one that just got built. So it's kind of like a continuous deployment model. And I'm going to make sure like my service plural is running. I'm going to make sure my init script is executable. I'm going to make sure like my plural binary is executable. Like all that stuff should be part of the build, but like it's more of like just in case something didn't work out. It's like a protective measure. And of course, my plural configuration is my YAML file that tells me where's my Elasticsearch host, what's my port, and what environment is this particular server in. Cool. So I'm going to go back into classifications. I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call it plural. And for this particular one, I'm just going to say like everything. So I'm just going to say, I don't know. Actually, we'll just do like all, of course, Red Hat, because it's all RPM based. Right, so there's 2 nodes right now, and I commit to change, and then any new additional nodes, it's going to say, hey, what's my classification, so I'm going to apply it, and I'll show you that here in a second. Right, and then I come down to plural, I set this, I add this class, and then I'm going to say, hey, my repo URL is, it is now this. Now I'm going to commit this change, right? So now this is live. So like I said, whether I wait 30 minutes or execute it now, like it's going to show up. So in Kibana, like sitting on top of Elasticsearch, I'm just going to refresh here. So like, as you can see, like I've already like made like visualizations, like data tables and all kinds of stuff automatically in here. And there's no hosts right now. Like there's no data. Like it's blank. Like it's no Elasticsearch data is in there right now. So if I go on like any particular node and I just do like agent T like I did on that other node, right? It's going to automatically do like what I just told it to do. Like here's my Yum repository, set it, go and install plural, and then talk to Elasticsearch like when the service starts. All right, great, it started. So like I refresh Elasticsearch, and there you go. Now we have all the data that I plural gathered about the system, and now it's on Elasticsearch. Like here's all my EC2 like AWS inventory centric data, and here's my TCP ports, and I did a search query to show me like all Python packages installed in the system, right? Just the basic search function of Elasticsearch, and right here is telling me like all of the kernel versions and like what hosts those kernel versions are at. 'Cause sometimes we care about those things. Like we care about like what kernel version they're at. Like so we can either do updates or we can just kind of just be aware of it, or security can come here and they can look so that you're not lying, or you don't have to purchase like fancy security software, like any of those kind of use cases. So that's great. So like I already applied to a node, but like I want to spin up a new node. And since I said all Red Hat systems, it means that like when this node comes up in AWS, like it's going to get whatever I classified it as, and it's automatically going to start doing things. Like no matter what I tell it, like if I classified it and it comes up with the right like information about that particular host, like it's going to do like whatever the modules I've defined for it. So right now, like I'm just going to execute that Puppet module to go and provision a new EC2 instance for me. So right now it's just like it's compiling a catalog and it's seeing like what's automatically already out there. Like I already have 2 AWS instances out there, so it's not going to do anything for those 2 instances. But since I just added a new one, it's going to say, oh, well, this is new. Like I'm going to create this particular instance with all the stuff that I've added. In this particular part of the demo, like by the time the agent comes up and like registers with the master, it'll be like 5 to 7 minutes before like all that happens. Like, operating system comes up in AWS like an instance and it gets classified and everything gets copied over. I didn't want that to happen. Oh, I just got to comment this out real quick. All right, great. Sorry, that was just me SPing some files over. Yeah, so you'll see like the EC2 instance get created. So like as that's running, like I'm gonna go and just kind of show you some more like in the dashboard, like all these runs that have been happening and like what you kind of just get out of the enterprise console after I verified that it kicked a new instance up. Oh. It's taking a little longer, so I'm just going to go through the dashboard, and we'll come back to that node, and everything should be set up correctly. So we had some changes, right? So just from like ops viewpoint or from anybody viewpoint, whether you're a dev or whoever, right? There's role-based access control. So like if you had like an operations center and like you didn't trust them to go classify nodes or anything, like you can say view only, right? And then come in here and they can see like, oh, something's changed in your particular change window, and you come into reports and you can see like all the changes that have happened during those runs. So it made sure like just as we saw in the console, like all the logs are here, and you got a different kind of viewpoint into that, which is what we call an enterprise console, like the event inspector, which you can drill down. Like there's 3 things that like Puppet cares about, which is like the classes, like the modules that you have, the nodes that you're managing, and the resources within those classes or those modules. So like you get 3 views into like troubleshooting like whatever's went wrong within your infrastructure or your application deployments. So say for particular resources, it tells me like everything that's changed. And say like I just care about like, I don't know, GCC package. And it tells me like the correlation between like where in the manifest that particular like code is being executed from, and it tells you like old value and new value. So like say you have a system out there today and somebody turns off the agent, they make some wild changes and you turn the agent back on, like you're gonna see like whatever changes they made, like what did they put in there beforehand, as long as you're managing it with Puppet. All right, cool. So if we come back to my console, we'll see that it created a new EC2 instance, agent timski2, it changed from absent to running. So right, if I come back in the console and I refresh, right, you're gonna see that instance spinning up. Right, it's initializing. So like it's just going through its normal boot process, and then after like it comes up with like SSH, because that's pretty much what that status check does. It's gonna like install the Puppet agent via the user data script, and then it's going to say what's my classification. It's gonna pull down its catalog, and then execute that. Which for this particular node, I've only defined the plural agent to be installed from that Yum repository. So is there any questions now as we're waiting for that to be configured and visible? Is there any questions towards like the Python Flask part, like like why I love Flask, or like why I chose Golang, or any of that kind of stuff? Like I don't know, like what is Python Flask, like any of that stuff?
So what is this language we're saying that describes the machines? Is that proprietary to Puppet, or it doesn't seem that it's not JSON?
Yeah.
So you're going to get another module read easily, is it?
Yeah. So so from the beginning, like the stuff I was showing you, like that's all. Like for example, like if I do Puppet resource, and then I want to see, I don't know, all the services on the system in Puppet code. Like this is what the language looks like. So it's going out and it's like saying like all the services on my Linux system, like what do they look like in Puppet code? So like this language that you've been seeing is all the Puppet DSL, our declarative approach to defining nodes. Say again? So Puppet's backend is like the agent side. Will be going to C++. It is Ruby. Same thing for the master side. They changed it to Clojure. Yeah, so they're kind of getting away from Ruby, but that doesn't mean that any code that you've written in Ruby isn't going to go away. Like it's a pluggable system. So like if you did have mcollective plugins, or you did have like factor plugins, like all those codes that like worked in the 3. series will still execute in the 4. series. You're just getting a lot of performance gain. So if you've ever worked with Puppet Enterprise, like say 3.1 or 3.0, like the web console was all it was all a Rails app, and now it's a JVM. If you ever worked with it, it was like slow, like it was slow, and now it's JVM. Like it responds pretty well. There's a lot of cool nifty features. Like a lot of performance was gained. It's easier to scale. So like that's kind of where it's going to now. And you'll see that like in the open source project, like they've already released the 4. series. They've already started rewriting a lot of those components. Like factor will be C++.
You're maintaining the same DSL.
Correct. A lot of it will still the same. Will still say the same. We actually are coming out with a language spec, which we didn't really have before. It was all more like, hey, like this is the best practice on how to write Puppet code and do X, Y, and Z. But now, like, it's becoming like its own like real language. Like there's a language spec, and you're gonna be able to do more. Like you're gonna be able to do like for loops. Like before you couldn't do that, and other things like that.
But still a DSL, still a proprietary language.
Correct. Yeah. So like, it's still gonna look pretty much the same way. Open brackets. Essentially, all this is key values, right? It's pretty easy syntax. The templating agent will, I haven't heard much about it, but I'm sure maybe like ERB is pretty like, it's a pretty good templating engine. So I'm sure like they'll either rewrite something like that in C++ or just kind of use already what they have in Ruby today. But yeah, the agent side and the master side, you know, those are being rewritten and factors being rewritten. So, and then of course any plugins or anything you've written today, like they should just automatically work without having to rewrite it in whatever is the recommended approach. You will see, like in 4.0, like some language changes will happen, but essentially it's going to look the same.
So what's the relationship between Puppet, Vagrant, and Docker?
Cool. So like, Vagrant's like, you want to provision a VM, like think of it as like a cool VMware tool, or a cool like local AWS environment, essentially. Like you're spinning up VMs, and then you can define like different kind of things that happen on those VMs as they spin up. Like you can call Puppet within a Vagrant VM. Docker is like, hey, I got a container, like I build everything into this container and then I ship it, and it runs essentially anywhere with a kernel 2.6, 431 higher, right? That's like a system level, like you're taking like the VM and you're shipping it around, where Puppet's like, you have servers, you have VMs, you have containers, and you have configurations within those VMs or containers, and you're configuring them to always look this way. So Puppet runs every 30 minutes. So say somebody goes in there today and changes something, it's going to change it back to what you've desired it to. So like if you set like, I want my compliance to look like this, or I want my application to look like this, somebody goes in there and changes something, it's going to go and change back. If Tomcat just stops because of, I don't know, heat problems or something, right? It's going to try to restart that service for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
That could be beneficial, or if you don't know it's there, it could be problematic. Yes.
Yeah, so like the best approach is to, like, anything that you care about in your system, like write Puppet code for, like, to manage. So you ensure a constant reliable state throughout its life cycle, whether it's through dev, through production and DR, to, you know, whatever, like you're ensuring like it's always going to look this way no matter what. Typically as system administrators, like you deploy a system today, and like 6 months you look at it again and it's like, man, like who's had their hands in this? And like it gets pretty crazy. Like that's just the life of a sysadmin, and then there's always finger pointing, and that's why there's silos today, right? Because we don't know how to work together.
There's a kind of another neat side benefit to that. We use Puppet at Unum, and we're managing a little over 500, Linux servers with it. And we use Puppet to maintain configuration. We use it to patch. We use it to do vulnerability, configurations, all kinds of stuff. But we're also pretty liberal with giving out sudo rights to users, because they've got apps to install, and they need that kind of access. So it's nice. Once we configure the system to be the way we want it, they have sudo rights. They go in and they want to change it. They do, and it works for a little while, and then it changes back to what we want. And then they open a ticket, and we go, well, shouldn't be messing with that, right? So it works out kind of nice.
Yeah. So there's many different use cases, but obviously, like at the end of the day, whether you're a startup or whether you're a large enterprise, like all you care about is your applications. So like to get to the state in which your applications are, in like configuration management and in version control and in continuous integration and someday continuous delivery, like that's a great thing. And like configuration management is just a small piece in there that plays in that like huge puzzle. Like how do I get from, dev to production as quick as possible without as many gatekeepers? Or at least as much audit trail as possible. So at least if something did pass through production, you have like, who did this, X, Y, and Z, right? And that should be your pull request essentially. But I saw so my third node came up, it registered a Puppet, it sent plural sent all the data to Elasticsearch. You get some like pretty searches, like obviously here's my 3 nodes with Python packages installed. I can kind of see diffs. I can see like what kernel versions are installed by like what host. There's 3, like of this particular kernel version, there's 3 systems, right? So like that's what that count is on the left. Like that's like basic Kibana features. Like if you just wanted to like index some kind of data within your infrastructure or applications, like that's what Elasticsearch is great for. And Kibana is right out of the box. Like if I wanted to like deploy like a generic Elasticsearch server and like Kibana and just send plural data to it, like it's gonna automatically just do this out of the box. Like I didn't have to fine tune Elasticsearch to do anything. And essentially like what this looks like, if you look in this particular doc, just to kind of like go over Elasticsearch, like real basic. You have an index, which in this case I'm calling dev, and then I have a type, which in plural I'm calling like a host name. So like, so for my particular environment, dev, like every environment you might want to kind of have segmented, or you might want to send all of your host data to a particular environment. You can call it all or something. But like if I were to get rid of like everything, like all my hosts under dev, that plural agent is going to resend the data. So like you're always having a constant dynamic inventory. Like where CMDBs have always like sucked, because like a new host comes up and you send all that information to CMDB and then it's gone in 2 months. Like you have a lot of these hosts that are just kind of dead in that CMDB, right? And it's kind of like the new approach to like thinking about like all this dynamic compute, whether it's you're bringing up Docker containers, or you're bringing up Docker hosts, or you're bringing up AWS instances, or you're auto scaling, you're blah blah. Like you want to have like somewhat of an inventory to see like what's kind of happening on those systems without having to log on or like do stuff like that. So we spent like an hour going over all this stuff, and it's been around like Puppet and like some of these cool technologies like Python and Golang and Elasticsearch and Jenkins. Any questions? Like, I have extensive experience with continuous delivery. You can ask me questions about that. DevOps culture, war stories. I can tell you some good ones. Maybe you got a problem in your current organization. You want to ask me how I would try to solve it. I'll answer it.
How do you get DevOps going in a big, siloed?
Don't call it DevOps.
What do you call it? Just working together.
Just what I've always done is I've always tried to like stay ahead of the curve of like everybody else, and then kind of like saying like, hey man, like you could do this too. Like you enable them. Like yeah, sure, like you and the network team don't get along, but like if there's like some integrations between what you're doing and what they're doing, it's like, hey, I saw that like new plugin that came out in NSX or Cisco Nexus switches, and it's like, hey, when can we use? And it's like, you're forming like a friendship, and you're kind of like building like a relationship like you would today, but like sometimes you got to do it through like knowledge, like enabling them, like, hey, you should try out this new blah blah I got, or like let me show you something cool, like I put this demo together and I'm evaluating Docker on the side, and I think it can benefit us in our build and test pipeline. Maybe not production, right? Like those kind of things. Like that's kind of what you do in the enterprise. And then if they don't want to like catch up to speed, then like, I don't know, tell your manager and have them fired or something.
We just did that. We haven't got enough people left for that.
No, it's not a great approach, but usually like people will be influenced through some cool stuff. And I mean, like there's so much cool technology out there today, like it's hard to ignore. Like Elasticsearch is cool, like all this stuff's cool. Like even if you're new to programming, like there's so many cool programming languages out there, and there's cool libraries out there, and there's already so many GitHub projects. Like I sometimes spend like 2 hours just on GitHub just looking for stupid projects. Like there's a GitHub project that will take pictures randomly on your webcam and like turn them into cat pictures or something weird like that. Like there's just cool stuff, like, right? And it's just like spending time looking at, it's almost like looking at YouTube videos but code, looking for cool projects. But there's some really cool projects out there to implement that like for example, like Plural, like I think this is a cool project, but like it's never gonna catch on not unless people look for it. And like I have other cool projects, or like I know friends who have other cool projects, and it's like not unless somebody writes about it or somebody talks about a Docker con, like it's never gonna catch on fire. So there's tons of like awesome stuff already out there you can utilize, or just like help build a vision that you can instill in your teams.
So what made you pick Golang for Plural?
Just being able to compile and run anywhere, and I mean like there's like Rust out there, and you know, Scala and some other like stuff or whatever, but it had a lot of buzz around it, and I wanted to see like if it was worth it, and like it was a whole nother like programming. It was like a kind of like just way different for me. I actually really like it.
You sound like you like Python a lot, so it kind of makes sense to go.
Well, no, I mean like there's like types, like the types before, like that's not like what you would normally do in Python. Like there's new stuff that comes with it. It's just more of like there's people who are writing a lot of system tools and a lot of web tools are writing in Golang, and like that's kind of what I do. Like I either write system tools or I either write web stuff, and it makes sense. Like if I was going to write an API, like I'd still use Flask because it's like so awesome and easy. But like Golang, like
Is there a micro framework for Go yet?
Yeah.
there's 1,000 of them, but like they don't make sense. They just don't make sense. Like I mean like if I had the time, I'd create my own. Like Flask is a good model. Like I love it. So, but yeah, that's kind of the reason why like I chose Golang for plural. Like I looked at Rust and I was like, yeah, this doesn't look as easy too. Like it was kind of discouraging. I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this is like I might as well just learn C. Like I don't know. So yeah, there's kind of only drivers, systems, and like web tools.
I think you're talking to a room full of Flask nuts, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were asking earlier about questions, like, you might not want to open that box.
That guy was the organizer of the Python group, which we met last night and talked about cool projects. Sean did OpenCV last night with Python, and he's a musician too, so he was waving his hands making music. I mean, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds pretty. I should have flew in last night. Yeah, like you know, I wrote like this cool Flask app to do like tagging for, you know, servers and metadata, like things that like VMware doesn't have. Like I wanted an AWS feature, but I wanted it everywhere, so I wrote a Flask app to essentially do the same thing. So and this helps with like bare metal provisioning and like all kinds of other stuff. So like if I wanted like build a runtime like metadata for like my Jenkins jobs, like if you ever notice like if you're constantly building AMIs, like if you're working in Amazon, you're constantly building AMIs or like templates in VMware or like Docker containers, it's almost like kind of like, well, which one should I use? I built like 15 of them, or I build one a month, and I'm advertising to my users like, hey, like this is the one you should use. Like it's horrible. Like you got to think of ways to get like easy adoption into like what you're trying to do in the enterprise or anywhere for that matter. So even startups have politics. So, it's true. So cool. All right. So yeah, I'm done.